good evening, and welcome to The Caring View. Every single week, I think we should change our theme tune, and I have a nice little jig to it, and I realise, no, it's perfect, we should keep it. I'm Adam Pennell, one of your hosts this evening, joined by Mark Tops, my co-host, and Paul Ince, our special guest for tonight. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that bell when you're watching on YouTube. Go to www.thecaringview.co.uk for all of our free resources and content. You can listen to our podcast directly from there or find us and subscribe to us on Spotify. All of the views we express tonight are of our own and not our respective companies. And good evening. How are we both?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. How are you? How are you, Paul?
I'm very well. Thank you, guys. Nice to be here this evening.
Nice to have you here with us. Now, for anyone who is watching this evening, the podcast that we've got running at the moment over on Spotify is all about entrepreneurship, how to succeed in startups and achieve the best you can be. It's absolutely fab. Episode 5 is out now with Sophie Chester-Glynn, and she is just an unstoppable force. I mean, director of 2 companies, PhD student, trustee, mother. It's ridiculous what Sophie gets up to and has got going on in her life. So it's definitely worth a listen. And like I say, you can go and listen to that back and back and back, as well as our How to Complete Your PIR podcast. We know the single assessment framework's coming in, but PIRs will be coming thick and fast throughout the year. So if you are struggling, go and check that out and you'll be able to sort yourself out on there. We also have a letter that we put up last week on Friday, which is all around the national minimum wage increase, national living wage increase. So feel free to go and have a look at that, utilize that, download it. Everything is completely free. Tonight we are talking social media, how to use social media to show off your business, to grow what you do, to get your name out there. So any questions, please do pop them through into the comments for us. And if anyone's got any views or opinions around the announcement of the social care funds today, please do let us know them in the chat as well. We would love to hear from you around the slashing of funding for the workforce development and the reformed plans of social care. So that's everything. Paul, I would love to do your introduction, but I'm going to admit I don't know too much about social media. I don't know too much about what it is you do as a company. So the floor is yours. Why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and what we're hopefully going to understand and know more about tonight.
All right, no worries, Adam. Okay, so my name's Paul Ince. Obviously, I'm not the only Paul Ince in the world. So I tend to go by the moniker BizPaul. It's a whole story about that, which I shan't bore you with. It's actually quite a boring story. But anyway, BizPaul is basically what most people call me, just to distinguish me from the England footballer. But I am a marketing consultant and strategist and speaker and trainer and all that kind of stuff. Let's say expert. Why not? As we're here. And I focus really on content marketing. So that includes videos, podcasts, writing, and social media. And I've worked with social media for about 15 years, I think it is now. 2008, I started when the company that I was working for at the time, which was an IT company, my boss said, "What's this thing called Twitter?" And I thought, well, I don't know, but I'll blag it. And so I just said, oh, yeah, it's a thing, and then had to learn it pretty quickly. So I now have my own agency called Like Mind Media based in Leicestershire, and we specialize in offering that sort of advice and training and expertise on those things. But social media is my bag, and I know it gets a bit of a bad rep, but I still love it.
Thank you very much. I think I agree with you. I think it depends on the platform entirely. I think some of them are followed by a load of trolls and then comments are negative. But I think some of them, and I talk about LinkedIn, are really collaborative, and actually it's a completely different platform than Twitter. I guess going straight back to kind of the basics of social media, how important is it for businesses to have an online presence on social media?
I'm going to say something controversial and say it's not absolutely essential. I think there is a bit of a myth that because it exists, you have to be there. And I think that's not necessarily the case, depending on the type of business and type of organization that one is. I think it's a much better place to start is by thinking about who it is that you're trying to communicate with and why you're trying to communicate with those people. So, for example, let's say you were selling those foot warmers, those electric foot warmers that you often see in the back of a Sunday supplement. You know, you don't see that being advertised on TikTok particularly because the demographic that that's aimed at is older people, and then a lot of them are on TikTok, but the location and how you sell that is perhaps the Sunday supplements where perhaps traditionally people would sit and read them on a Sunday and say, oh, that's quite interesting. So the same applies really to social media. What is it that you're trying to do? And is social media the right place? And then if it is, where do you go and which platforms do you choose? But I don't actually think it's essential. So I think that's a good place to start.
So just on that, I want to bring up the whole TikTok situation. I want to bring up the Twitter situation because I used to be a good Twitterer. You know, I used to twit. I used to twit quite a lot. And then some megalomaniac sort of world-dominating mega billionaire came and bought it. And I've actually started to move away from Twitter now because I found I don't know, everything's very much up in the air. And I love TikTok. And then all of a sudden there's this huge inquiry into whether TikTok's safe. And, you know, you've got the government sort of trying to ban it and the American Senate wondering whether TikTok uses Wi-Fi on your phone, which I found rather amusing. How safe is social media nowadays? Because there's a lot of them. Are we to believe the worry, or can we be confident that actually our data is safe within there?
I'm conscious that we're only here for an hour, so I'll keep this one short. But I think my opinion on this is that a lot of the noise at the moment around TikTok is political. It feels a bit political to me. Now, this afternoon, because I'm a little bit sad, I read the new TikTok privacy policy. Now, obviously, it's been in the news. You can see in the comments there that TikTok's been in the news today for a big fine for misusing children's data. Now, that story is really all about under 13-year-olds using the platform and what they do with it, and the Information Commissioner's Office really feeling like they didn't stick to the letter of the law for that particular small demographic. But I've read the TikTok privacy policy today, and I have to tell you that it doesn't capture anything that Instagram and Facebook doesn't already capture. And that's why it feels a bit political to me, because of course TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, and Facebook and Instagram is owned by Meta, that's a US company. And I think that some of this is political in terms of their role is to protect a US company, where a Chinese company is stealing quite a lot of the market share from that organization. In terms of how safe is it, I think if you use these platforms, it's worth going in with your eyes open. The types of information that they tend to collate is any of your usage on the app. Well, that sort of feels fair if you're going to use their application, that they record and keep information about what you post on there. They have the messages that you send, so that's important to think about in terms of what you say. And the question is, where does the data go and who has access to that data? And I think we possibly don't know the full story there, so that's worth thinking about. But I think what's more, it's not concerning, but to be more aware of how the data is used is perhaps more important. So things like your behaviors on the platform is then used to decide what else to show you. And then that opens up the whole conversation about how do you protect users from seeing things that are harmful. So one of the challenges I think that all platforms have, particularly TikTok and Instagram from the Reels perspective, is one of the things that is looked at is how long somebody watches a particular piece of content for? Well, if you find something a bit shocking, you might watch that for a bit longer. And if that suggests that you like that, or that you might see more of that, you're going to be delivered more of that content. I think that's where it gets a little bit sketchy. Having said that, I think a really good skill for people to have is to learn how to curate the content that you see. So how to say, I don't like this content, or can I see less of this, or to actively follow or unfollow people. My Twitter is a wonderful, happy, positive place because I make sure that it is. And I think that's a good skill for people to learn.
It is quite difficult, especially when we're in a world where we want everyone to like us, we want as much attention as possible. We do tend to forget that actually we need to protect our own areas. I also question my own habits because my TikTok FYP is just, I don't know what I've been watching. My algorithm is completely out of whack at the moment. So just on this then, what are, for social care, for people who are listening to this, so we've got, say, home care providers, we've got care homes, we've got nursing homes, we've got shelter.com, we've got people who probably are their own private carers. What sort of social medias are best for us to be focusing on for our business?
Again, I want to bring it back to the audiences that you want to serve and what the purpose is there. So let's say you wanted to use it to recruit frontline care staff, which I know is a big challenge in the sector. How do you do that? Where should you go? Well, LinkedIn would be great for senior leadership, members of staff or the board, for finding people with experience and really seeing who's out there and maybe recruiting them from there. But by and large, frontline care staff are not typically heavy users of LinkedIn, but might be using things like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram in a personal capacity. And then it would be important to perhaps have a presence there to be effectively where that audience is and to create content that attracts them to your business. If you're also looking at using social media to connect and promote the services that you offer, either to people that you support or maybe their family members, then you need to look at sort of where they might be. And if you were a care provider focusing on more elderly people, then perhaps you would need to look at their children, maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Where are they? Well, they're more on Facebook than TikTok, so perhaps you would choose Facebook then. If you were providing support services for younger adults, then perhaps you would look for where their parents are or where their peers are. Or, that's the kind of thing that you need to think of. Who's your audience and what are you talking to them about? And then where are they? And it would be really reasonable, actually, for an organization to segment some of that stuff, to say, we're going to use LinkedIn for this, and we're going to use TikTok for that, for recruiting our frontline care staff, and we're going to use Facebook to communicate with the people who use our services or their members of family.
I think that's some really good advice, because I think historically, definitely as somebody kind of joins events and kind of follows it from my own point of view, for my own company, is that a lot of people are saying, well, get on TikTok because that's where the next generation are, or get on LinkedIn, get on Instagram, sorry. And actually they forget kind of the others. And I think actually that advice of actually you might want to utilize all of them, but for a different reason.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about though is that all of these platforms have algorithms that determine what a user sees. So really, we're in a situation now where you can utilize the platform's technology and talk to lots of different types of people and allow the algorithm to deliver the right piece of information to the right person. So Adam, when you're talking about your FYP on TikTok, then what you see is obviously a bit weird, but it's different to what maybe Mark or I might see, because the algorithm is going to deliver the right content. So actually, it's a lot easier these days where you have got multiple different audiences to perhaps just rely on what you create and let that do its thing.
Mark's no hope. I send him my content. I'm like, oh my god, Mark, look what's on my FYP. So I'm pretty sure Mark's might be very similar to mine at times.
How much does the liking and the save? So I use my TikTok very differently than probably most people. So I like content that I genuinely like, or that I think, oh, actually, it's 1 a.m. and I can't send that link to somebody now. I'll like it now and I'll send it to them morning, and then I unlike it. And I save content that I think, oh, actually, this is going to be really useful for work. So I feel like my algorithm kind of plays between kind of work, HR related content, and then funner stuff. Yeah, I didn't know whether you know kind of how that algorithm works, and also for people watching that are thinking of uploading content.
Well, it knows the difference, really. I mean, the TikTok algorithm in particular is so incredibly advanced and sensitive that you're probably giving more away to TikTok by where your eyes are moving, or little twitches of your jaw, or blinks, or swallows, or things like that when you're interacting with it. So I think it's likely to be able to tell that things that you save are more important to things that you like and what you're doing there, because it will track all of that information. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's quite normal, though, actually, what you've described, to save stuff that we want to come back to later, and also to use the like feature for things that we want to come back to later. I think it's easier to find stuff that you like. So that's kind of like the quick stuff. That seems quite normal to me.
Oh,
go on, Adam.
No, I was just going to say, just before we move off the types of social medias, Tina's come up in the comments and just asked about Instagram, and whether there is, well, has anyone used it? And I'm going to interpret it is there a use for Instagram in social care businesses?
I would say so. I mean, again, it's just about where the audience is. Instagram, the demographic there in terms of age demographic is quite broad, but about 70% of users are under 35. Now, interestingly, only 40 odd % of TikTok users are under 35. So there's an unusual disparity there, which people often think, well, TikTok's for young people, and it's not necessarily. I think with Instagram, they've got Instagram Reels now, which is a complete carbon copy of TikTok, essentially. And what both TikTok and Reels do is get a piece of content out far and wide to as many people that the relevant algorithm thinks should see it. So if you were particularly looking to kind of spread your message as wide as possible, Instagram Reels would be a good place to do that. TikTok would be a good place to do that. It's essentially the same type of content. There are some technicalities that are different between the two, and we could get into how Instagram does not want you to upload a TikTok, and it will penalize you for that, but TikTok doesn't really care. But I think that's kind of technical. I think if you feel as though you get a lot of your audience is on Instagram, or you feel that that's the case, or that that's the case, then by all means use Instagram. There are definitely some efficiencies to have between that. Increasingly, and this could be important as we move through the years, what I think you will see is those children of elderly parents that need support will probably gravitate towards Instagram rather than Facebook, just because they're used to using Instagram and they've started to get older. So you have to kind of pay attention to the transience of the people that you're trying to talk to and where they are.
I think that's a good tip around actually where the younger generation will be as they're looking for care for their parents. So just taking it back a step, what kind of content should care providers be looking to upload? Should it be pictures? Should it be videos? Should it be of their team? Should it be of the people they support? Should it be looking at the benefits that they offer? A mixture of all of them?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't want to like oversimplify it, because I've got a whole business where I try and make sure it sounds very complicated. But I think businesses overthink things and worry about things that they possibly don't need to worry about as much, because, as I say, an algorithm will determine who it goes for. A good tip from me would be to create less content, less volume of content, and put the effort into making it of a higher quality. So perhaps thinking about using video first and foremost, because every social media platform loves video. the algorithms tend to prioritize it and prefer it, and audiences find it easy to watch. So you can often get a message across more effectively by creating a video than if you were trying to articulate that in a big, long text-based post. So I would try and go for some video if you can. But I think, again, think about what your objectives are. If you want to, let's talk about the recruitment piece. I think you should show what it's like to work in your organization, show members of the team, show some of the fun stuff that you get up to. So I watched a really good video by Rushcliffe Care, which is a company near me, sort of South Nottinghamshire it is. And, they did a great Christmas video. Everyone's in Santa hats, or there was a Grinch, and it was fun. And it showed them having fun with the people that they support in their homes. And it really showed them in a positive light. It showed them as a caring organization, but it also showed them as a fun organization to work with. And you could kind of imagine yourself working there as a member of the team, getting along with people, and having a lot of fun. So I think showing that is good. I think it's perfectly reasonable to show people who use services. We often talk about consent, and can somebody consent to being part of that? I think consenting is important, but there's plenty of people who will take support from organisations that can consent and want to be part of something. And I think that's a good way to show people. Something that I saw recently was a great video of this lady. She was jiving, and she must have been sort of late 80s, and she was brilliant. She had kept all of her flexibility there, and it was all about her, and I thought it was fantastic, actually.
Mark and I will always disagree on whether people who use care services should be included on social media. I know we have quite different views, and yeah, I am for it. I used to run a care home, I used to run a home care agency, and we very much had our lives spread across our social medias. I would just add, for me, on the angle of consent, is just having it written down that they consent to be involved in social media is not enough. Because I've been out for dinner before and someone's taken a photo of me and I've gone, wait, before you put that on Facebook, let me see it, please. Because I'm fine with a photo going up, but if I look dog awful, not happening. So if we are, and we have got consent, let's just double check with people before we make posts. You happy with this photo going up? Because you said you were fine with social media. Is it okay to go up? Because I think there's a fine balance between consent and implied consent and lack of dignity. And it can get quite difficult, but I think it's wondrous being able to see what life goes on inside a home. Mark, I know your opinion's different than mine.
Yeah, I look at some of the kind of campaigning I've done, and then the amount of people that reach out to me, and I think, God, I have no idea how that article or whatever I've been on has reached that part of the world. And I think when it comes to the people that I support, it's actually, do they fully understand actually that you're uploading it maybe to Facebook, but it could end up in Australia, it could end up in Japan or wherever. And actually, do they fully understand and have the capacity? And then what happens actually if they retract that and say, actually, I want you to remove all of those images from me? Because I know actually if I try to remove a lot of the images of mine, it's actually really hard then to get them off of Google and other platforms. And yeah, and I think that for me is why I'm always like, actually don't use people. And I think a lot of my experience has been with people with learning disabilities, and a lot of those haven't had capacity. So actually it's been quite easy. But then I found other ways of being able to share bits and pieces. So it might have been that they made a cake, and it might have been that they used products from the garden that we were growing. And actually I could use the picture of the end product and talk about that journey of actually how we supported people and give it a completely different insight. But yeah, two very, very different views. I think it's very different if you've got somebody with capacity who's maybe using social media of their own accord. But again, you need to make sure that they fully understand actually around privacy and who they're talking to, and making sure they're not obviously at risk. I think there was a comment here from Tina who has mentioned about a client of hers who uses Facebook to communicate with relatives, which has better responses than residents' meetings attendance and gives the freedom to join when flexibility. The average age of relatives is 62, which I do think nowadays, there's a lot of people on social media. It's very easy to engage with people. And Andy's come back in and said, "Yes, Tina, Facebook private pages. Controlled offers many advantages. I recently convinced a local NHS trust and it's working very well." And so I think there's definitely pros and cons, and it's just around actually who's using it and what the privacy controls are. So talking of privacy controls, Paul, what would you recommend for care providers? Would you recommend it being public and open, or would you recommend that it is closed and people maybe have to, thinking about Facebook here, that it is a group and people have to request to join? Or
I think it's a decision that's beyond social media, I think, and just want to kind of just touch back on the consent idea, because I think when I'm talking about consent, I am totally talking about somebody's ability to understand, and consent is in that moment and can absolutely be withdrawn at any time, and a company needs to have the procedures in place to pursue that in terms of the laws that exist in this country around the ability to be forgotten, the ability to go and have your information taken offline, which is part of GDPR and very other privacy things. I think the decision needs to be really about what are we comfortable with sharing? Why do we feel like we need to share anything? What is the purpose of that? Who is that serving? Who is that benefiting? And the sorts of discussions to have, I think, are around perhaps we need to promote the services that we have, or we have spaces to fill, or we have positions to fill, perhaps. And therefore, what are we doing to meet those objectives? And let's take recruitment as an example. Well, you kind of got to tell people there's a vacancy if you want that vacancy to be filled. If you have a new setting and you have space, and presumably there's a business case to be made for filling those spaces, you have to tell people that there's spaces there and to promote it. But if you've got a website, then you're doing that already. I don't think social media needs to necessarily be that different from a website in that context, because on your website you're making something very public, unless you're putting something behind a paywall or a login for friends and family and people that you support. The difference with social media is that it's interactive. If you choose to put a picture of someone that you support on your website and you put it on your Twitter or on your Facebook, the only difference really is that there is a facility for somebody to make a comment about that person in public. So that's the thing to think about there.
Just coming back with the comments. So I have noticed there's quite a few care providers now that have turned comments off. So they post quite frequently, but comments are always off. Is that something you would advocate for or not? Because I've always been led to believe that comments obviously drive that algorithm and help you then expand the reach. I'm not the expert.
They do, absolutely. In terms of how these platforms work, you do not see every piece of content that exists. And so if you are looking to grow the audience, if you're looking to get in front of as many people because your objectives are to fill the position or to promote your business, then you kind of have to play the game if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, you could be posting stuff, but it won't travel very far. And the way that works generally is interactions from the people seeing it. So likes, shares, comments. And that is the game, I suppose. So yes, you do need that in order to get seen by as many people as possible. What you don't have to accept is negativity, offensiveness, trolling, anything like that. To a certain extent, you can control it proactively by, in some cases, sort of including mute words or banned words on your Facebook page. You can set a whole series of phrases or words that you don't permit. So that's one thing. You can obviously manage comments as they come in, remove them, delete them, block people, whatever that is. That requires some management. Or yes, you can absolutely not allow those comments there. I've seen a couple of comments about things like how to communicate with the public and also the families and things like that. So it is perfectly reasonable to have different approaches to communicating with a family. I wouldn't dream of suggesting that someone in a care setting should publicly tweet something about someone who's using the services and trying to communicate directly with them. Having said that, there are tools within these platforms, direct messaging, for example, within a Facebook page, within Instagram, within Twitter, within LinkedIn, where you can have direct communication with somebody. And there's a lot of evidence to say that people like to have direct communications with businesses and organizations that they're involved with on these platforms because they're using them all the time, and it's a great way to communicate. So I think it's a case of really thinking about what are we comfortable with, what rules are we going to set for ourselves, what's our company policy on that, and where are our boundaries that we're going to set and stick to.
I think they're all really, really good tips. And I do want to move on to, in a second, around strategizing and how as businesses we can build our own sort of social media strategy. But I just want to bring a comment in from Nicola, because yes, Nicola's an old colleague, an old friend of mine. We worked closely together on things in the past. And I have, when I ran my services, been subject to complete troll attacks to the point where we had to get the police involved because it was malicious, it was libelous, everything was false, and it got to the point where we had to turn reviews off, and we couldn't operate much on our social media for fear of actually being trolled and attacked. How can we do our best to prevent these sort of negative attacks on social media? And sometimes it might just be the odd sort of nasty comment, but when you've got a predominantly sort of positive social media presence, everyone's really happy, you're getting 40, 50, 60 likes a post, and then you get the odd sort of angry, no, this place is crap and I wouldn't trust anyone with my mum here. How do we overcome that? What's the best way to respond to protect not only our image but our business and the people we support?
It is a tough one, and I think I would acknowledge that it is difficult to deal with. Nobody likes to see those kinds of comments being made anyway, particularly if they're unfair or worse. I think really the things that you can do straight away, if we take a comment, if it breaks the rules of the platform, so if it could be considered hate speech or inciting violence or anything that's tenuous with that, I would straight away report it, because that will be investigated by the platforms. Now, that investigation might be automated and it might not generate the result that you want, but I would report that, because people who make those comments need to have that kind of black mark in their book, in my opinion. Depending on the platform, I would do something with it then. So if we take Facebook as an example, as a page administrator, if the comment is made against a post on a page, then you can hide that comment, and you can also delete it. But the reason to hide it, I mean, look, like if it's offensive to look at, then please just delete it. You don't need to be reminded of it whenever it's there. But I often say to people, if it's just really negative and it's not true, I would still report it, but I would hide it on a Facebook page, because when you hide a comment, it's still visible to that person who made the comment, but to nobody else apart from you as the page administrator. And that means that they believe that it's still there and you've just not responded to it. If you delete it, I mean, the thing is, they've made that comment to get a reaction from you. If you delete it, I guarantee you they will come back and make another comment and make it worse. So I do sort of suggest that people, maybe think about just hiding that if you can stomach it. On other platforms, it's not as easy to do that. I think where something is untrue, I would think about whether or not you want to engage with it or not. Often it's better to just leave it and ignore it. if it's potentially libelous, I would again report it to the platform. But you often find that your community, the people that follow your account, will know that that's not true, and just carry on as they are. I think feeding trolls is one of the worst things that you can do. Engaging with them is one of the worst things you can do. Having said that, no one deserves to be spoken about in a certain way, and I would report things first and foremost, and potentially get the police involved if that's what's necessary.
And trolls are like gremlins. If you feed them after midnight, they multiply. So don't do it.
It's very easy, isn't it? People are keyboard warriors. It's easy to put a comment on there. You're not facing somebody in person, and I do think that's sad. That's what we have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think sadly deal with more and more these days. But I know Adam is keen to move on to strategizing. I had one question before we move on to that. Have you got any examples of some common mistakes that maybe care providers have made, and how going forward other care providers could avoid them?
I think one thing to look out for is that your brand is represented by your account, but also by your staff in their personal accounts as well. So lots of staff might have their own Facebook account, which you won't be able to see because Facebook is actually very private. But they might have a public Instagram, they might have a public TikTok. And it might be that they are creating content about their life and about their work and about their day-to-day stuff that you might not be that happy with. And it's quite interesting, the whole like Gary Lineker BBC thing, because that's actually quite a common situation. People have the right to have their own private social media account and to say things that they want in public, but it's worth having a good social media policy in place and just giving people a bit of advice on, look, we're not going to stop you from having a TikTok, but if you're going to talk about your work day, then we would like to understand what it is that you're talking about and how you're talking about it. So the kind of Wild West element of that is one thing to think about. I think clearly releasing private and personal information is a big no-no. And that's sometimes easily done by accident. If you're filming or you're taking pictures, what's around you? What's on the notice board? What can be zoomed in and seen? Is it someone's mobile number? Is it? This is not quite the same example, but I once came across a school that did some kind of thing about their staff in the staff room, and in the corner you could see the sort of poster of like children that had safeguarding issues. So with their picture and the name and like whether they were SEN or whatever. And that's easily done by not paying attention. So I think, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you. You are potentially looking after vulnerable people. And so you need to kind of have that safeguarding mindset whenever you're creating content.
Oh, it sounds like it's a lot to get your head around. The one thing I try and remind people is the internet's forever, unfortunately.
Yes.
Unless we have like our sort of Skynet, Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator moment, the internet's forever. And sometimes I'm on TikTok and I know people do it for the likes and they do it to sort of build their own awareness. I just sit there and think, in 15 years' time, are you going to be happy looking back at that video of what you put up? Because or even just the comments, your comments are there and it's easy to screenshot something. Celebrities do it all the time. They have a faux pas and they go, oh no, must delete this post. Pamela Anderson's ex, Tommy, he always doing it on Instagram, and people screenshot faster than you can delete. So the internet's forever. I do want to get onto strategizing, but we've got a question around the Nextdoor platform. I have no idea what this is, so I'm going to ask it. Any thoughts on the Nextdoor platform?
It's not my area of speciality, I have to say. Nextdoor is a social media platform that really focuses on a local area, so kind of like your local community or streets or things like that. I think it's like any social media platform. If you feel like the audience is there, the people are there, then it might make sense, particularly if you're talking a lot about things that are happening locally. My worry with Nextdoor really is it just another platform to manage, and how many people are actually using it? You know, if you guys haven't heard of it, you know, does that mean that it's not really that well known, and therefore it's perhaps not worth putting as much effort into when you could get more access to people via Facebook or something like that? But, you know,
I'm a liar. I've got it. I'm a liar. And do you know why? It's just reminded me now that I actually have this. I downloaded it during the pandemic to sort of donate food to you know, drop things off for people if they needed it, to make sure everyone was okay, and if they needed anything, if I needed anything from my cat home. The majority of the posts I get on this about dog poo. Oh, can you believe someone dropped dog poo down Lawson's Road again? And that's literally all I have on my Nextdoor. So I've muted it, completely forgot about it, and it's just broken my memory that I actually have it. I call it the dog poo app, because that's all people talk about on it is dog poo on the street. But I suppose it's there. Oh, Hannah in the comments said it's fab for Grace Cares. I suppose all social medias have the benefits if the demographic is there and they're there to be used properly. Right, let's get on to strategizing. So we have a ton of questions to ask you around this, but first and foremost, what are some effective strategies that businesses can use to engage with customers on social media? The simple things that they can go, actually, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go and engage with them.
Ask questions. That's the easiest way to get engagement, I think, is to ask questions, because where people respond to those questions is either in the comments or via the reactions on the particular platform, the like, the love, the laugh, the, you know, whatever it is. Asking questions is an easy thing to do. You can ask questions about, you know, asking an opinion and getting a response, asking people to vote, asking people what they think, getting input on some things. It's a really easy way to get engagement, and engagement will increase the reach of the posts. And I think one of the a good thing to perhaps think about is when you've got a really important message to deliver, maybe it's a really important announcement or piece of information that people need to know, it's worth creating some kind of content, some posts beforehand that are going to try and get maximum engagement. So maybe that's where you ask a question, because if you get engagement, if people like and share and comment on those posts, what you'll find is the number of people that see the next post and the next post increases. So if you've got a really important message, don't waste the opportunity by just making that out of the blue. Put the work in beforehand before you make the announcement. So that's you know, engagement is a really important strategy. The other thing is, I'd say look at the features of the particular platform that you're using. So Facebook, for example, has a lot of information that you can provide to Facebook about the page itself. So where is it? The location, that's kind of important if you're trying to communicate with a local area, because if you tell it you're if you tell it that you serve Nottingham, then it's going to show that to more people in Nottingham. But you've got the physical location, you've got, you know, opening hours, or maybe you could put visiting hours. You've got a space to put a bit of a blurb about your organization and what that's about, what you believe. You've got information on there about events that you're running. If you're having an open day or you're having a recruitment day, you know, you can put those on there. There's actually a lot of features of a Facebook page that will help you as an organization get seen by more people or get in front of the right people. LinkedIn, you know, again, great for events, but particularly good for finding people who have certain job titles. If you're looking to recruit a home care manager, then, you know, look for that job title on LinkedIn in your area, and you'll see people that have the skills that perhaps you already have. So always look at the different features and try and use as many of them as you can.
Some great tips there. Thank you very much. And in terms of planning content, how much do you recommend that providers, managers are planning the content that goes out, and how often should they be putting that content out as part of their strategy plan?
Well, this is where I give the really duff answer of it depends, right? So because algorithms will deliver the right content to the right people at roughly the right time, I think one thing that you could do is think about what are the different themes that I want to talk about. So if I want to talk about recruitment and job vacancies, if I want to talk about events that we're doing, if I want to talk about announcements, if I want to do an initiative, if I want to do something about the services that we offer, or focus on family support that we might offer. If you think about the themes of what you want to talk about, I would find a way of writing them down, listing them, putting them on post-it notes. So you've got these core themes that you want to talk about. Then what I would do is I would try and make sure that I've got quite a good spread of that in all of my content. So what you don't want to do is go, right, this week we're going to talk about the services that we offer, and next week we're going to talk about vacancies that we have. Because if someone's looking for that piece of information this week, but you mentioned it last week, then they're not necessarily going to see it. And you can't control what your audience is actually thinking, because everyone's different. Everyone's at a different stage in their thinking process. So if you've got your themes, I would try and make sure that overall you've got a good spread. I'd then look at thinking, well, what type of content do I want to put out there? So if I'm thinking, right, recruitment, and I'm thinking that I want to do, I don't know, maybe I want to do a video, then let's work out what sort of video I want to create about that recruitment. Maybe it's just a very quick video about these are the vacancies that we've got, or maybe we do another video which is a day in the life of a care worker, so people can see what the job entails. Think about it on those layers. And then I think if you've got that literally on a piece of paper somewhere, that's a good starting point for you to actually deliver the content that you're going to create. And whenever it is that you decide to post things, because some people might have a lot of time that they can spare, some people may not have very much time, and they're doing it as part of their other job. Go back to that document and go, right, okay, I can see in one place what I need to do, and let me stick to that. But some consistency with that is good. And then I actually don't think you need to prescribe how many times per week you should post. I think it's more important to be consistent, and to not put yourself under too much pressure to create 25 posts on Twitter, 4 on Facebook, and 3 things on LinkedIn. The only thing that I would definitely try and think about, just to kind of like add to all the information I've literally just given you, is with Facebook in particular, you don't need to post as often as you might think, because Facebook reacts very badly to posts that don't get any engagement. So if you tend to over post on Facebook, post after post after post after post, people kind of stop responding because they've seen it all. And that's a really bad signal. So I think you can post less often than you think. And if you're going to post less often, make it a good video or a good post with a picture, have a purpose, understand why you're doing it. I would avoid things like Happy Friday or Happy Monday. It's shallow. It doesn't, it's nice, but it doesn't serve a purpose really. So I would draw a little plan and stick with that plan.
So going on that then with plans, 2 things: content schedulers, what are your opinions? And replication of content. I know we've spoken a lot about it, so forgive me if I've misunderstood on some of these things, but is it wise for someone to go, I'm going to go post this post and I'm going to do exactly the same thing on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and I'm just going to put it out there? Or should we vary our content on the different platforms to a point where actually we're posting different things on different platforms. But most importantly, content schedulers, is there a point in them? Should we be using them? What's your thoughts? What's the best one? We're not the BBC. Plug if you want to. I don't know whether you're allowed.
Okay. Well, guess what I'm going to say? It depends. Content schedulers, yes, I think they can be extremely helpful because they're a good tool to make the work that you do efficient. And you know what? From my experience of this sector, most people are doing social media as part of some of the role that they have. So let's be real here and say that we need to save ourselves a bag of time if we can. So I would use schedulers. I think depending on which platforms you're focusing on depends on which ones you go for, which ones you use, and there's some pros and cons to a lot of them. So if you were just posting on Facebook and Instagram, then I would use the Facebook Creator Studio, which is facebook.com/creator studio. And what that will give you is it will give you your Facebook page that's linked to your Instagram account, and you can create content for both of those platforms in there, and it will schedule it and post it. And the advantage there is that you are directly posting on the platform. There's no third-party tool to get it wrong or break a connection or anything like that. And you can also manage comments in the inboxes and DMs there as well. So that's nice and simple. If you're bringing in other platforms from the outside the Meta suite, then you've really got to use something else. Well, I say that all of the platforms allow you to schedule in the future within the platform. So you could just schedule it each one separately if you wanted to. The benefit of a content scheduler then really, if you're doing multiple platforms, is the ability to create the content in one place and say, I want this to go out on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram. So that will save you time. So that's a big tick in the box. That's served that purpose. I think the things to be aware of with that scenario is the platforms in sometimes react very similarly, and it would be fine, for example, to post a long caption for a Facebook post and then to put it on Instagram and to put it on Twitter, because they will probably LinkedIn, because they will probably display well. But if you're going to stick 20 hashtags in, that's not really the done thing on LinkedIn. So it might look a little bit strange there. But I don't think we need to overthink that particularly. Look, ideally, if I was doing a strategy for a business and they were paying us to deliver that, I would be looking at creating slightly different, nuanced content for different platforms to respond to the way that the platform works. But that's great, isn't it? Because I've got a team of people that create it all the time. If that's not the reality, then let's not try and do that. Let's keep it simple. Let's schedule it in different places. Just be aware of completely spamming Facebook because you decided to send your tweet, which you were doing 5 times a day, also to Facebook. Just be aware of that. One final thing on that scheduler to be aware of. There are moments, and we've experienced them in the last sort of year, I guess, where something happens that changes people's mood. So when the Queen passed away, if you've got content that's scheduled, you need to pay attention to what's going on and stop stuff from going out, because there were plenty of examples last September where people did not get the timing particularly right. Well, they thought they did, but as it turned out, if things go out and it looks bad on you, then there's a bit of tidying up that you have to do afterwards. But who knows whether that will be a situation in the future.
Never say never, I say.
Never say never, because it happened a few times, really. We had, Prince Philip dying, which was kind of like a bit of a dress rehearsal, but from a social media perspective. And then we knew what to do. I mean, those of us in the industry, sorry, I didn't mean to call it dress rehearsal, you know what I mean? But in the industry, like, we actually learned a lot from that, because the expectation was that people would be upset for a very long time. And actually what happened was all people's plans were from like 20 years ago. And what happened was by the Friday, people were saying, where's Gogglebox? So what we learned from that, and clearly the national broadcasters learned that when the Queen died, was that there's a certain level of mourning that needed to take place, but there was actually getting back to normality relatively quickly. And so again, you have to pay attention to what's going on, and things do change all the time. But the great thing about social media is that you can react to things, and so you can get a new message out, or you can put your condolences out there, or you can respond to a piece of legislation that's just come in that you need to tell people about.
Thank you very much. I think that's some really good tips there around actually if you're scheduling content, what you need to be mindful of. I'm very mindful of time, so very quickly wanted to touch base around paid advertisement. Yes, no, any tips? Keeping it brief there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the budget to do it, we're all trying to get people's attention. And one way of guaranteeing to get people's attention is to pay to be inserted into an ad slot that exists on these news feeds. So I think a great thing about social media advertising is it's one of the cheapest forms of advertising that you will be able to get, because it's much cheaper than things like Google ads or putting a big print run on something. It also allows you to pull ads quickly, or change ads, or invest more where it's working. So it's a big yes from me, but you have to keep your eye on things, and you have to get your targeting right, because these platforms will just take your money.
Yeah, and it eats it up really quick, like really quick. So before we disappear and say goodnight to everyone, and I think the Liverpool's played on follow football, apparently Liverpool's playing, I've seen that in the comments. Top 3 tips that you can give to providers, and while you have a think about it, I'll probably give one of mine, and I'll come to Mark first, because Mark, if you do not know, is LinkedIn royalty. He's got like 19,000 plus connections and followers. People stop him. He's been to LinkedIn offices because they're like, "Oh, Mark, tell us how you use our platform so well." So, Mark, top tips from yourself.
I think my top
tips.
I've
utterly embarrassed you.
I think my top tips are: don't compare what everybody else is doing and think that's right, because actually it might not be. When I'm posting, I just put content out that I think I would benefit from reading if somebody else had shared that. And I do engage with the comments. I ignore the negative ones. And like Paul said earlier, I do delete them or hide them. And I don't chase the likes. I don't care whether my content got 1 like, 100 likes, 1 million likes. Like, I really wouldn't care what it got, because to me, I make that post in the hope that it benefits one person. And if I can benefit one person, then that post has been meaningful to me. So that would be my tips.
I think for myself, and very good tips, and Mark's posts are always like stratosphere sort of interactions, is an absolute inspiration on social media. And I'm the complete opposite, because I get fed up of it. I get bored, and I find it absorbs too much of my time. So I suppose my sort of tip is only do what you're comfortable with. If you're doing it as an individual for yourself, do what you're comfortable with, because if you start doing too much of it, it becomes laborious and you'll hate it and you'll switch off. If you love doing it, great. Just make sure it doesn't eat too much into your personal life and have some downtime from it. But just do what you're comfortable with. Otherwise, you'll do what I used to do and post loads and really go at it ham. And then for a month, just disappear. And all you get is people going, "Are you okay? I've not seen you on social media for a while." No, I'm absolutely fine. I just got bored. So just do what you're comfortable with. Consistency. I think you mentioned that earlier, Paul. Consistency really is key to this. But from the master, the expert, our sort of sensei on social media, Paul, last top tips from yourself.
I think you are the best people to talk about your organization. You live and breathe it every day. You understand the people that you support and the people in their network that need to know. So have faith in your own knowledge, and talk with authenticity about your organization using the voice that you would normally use. I think we see an increasing desire for that authenticity on social platforms. So why not just be yourself? Don't use fancy language. Use the language that you would use, and connect with people. That would be my tip for success. All the other stuff is kind of technical, but if you can stick with your, being your true self, I think that's a good place to start.
Well, look, I mean, I think we say this every week, we've only just scratched the surface on the world of social media. But for anyone who does want to know more, is looking for support, or maybe even employing Paul's services, you can, we'll get the website up on the screen just before we close off. You can go and find them at Like Mind, at BizPaul on Twitter, Paul Ince on LinkedIn. Absolutely fantastic session tonight. I've learned loads. I probably still won't do too much with it because I'm lazy when it comes to social media. But I think it's something we all need to be conscious about now, especially since the pandemic. People have changed how they source their care, and people have changed how they source their jobs. That's just it. Fact. Landscape's changed, and we do need to sort of catch up on this. But I think it's been really insightful tonight just to figure out the sort of basics and the understandings of it. So thank you so much for joining us, Paul. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening. Mark, thank you so much for being here this evening. Our podcast is still running, so episode 6 will go out on Monday next week, and that is with Ollie from Sona. And Ollie has been very forthcoming in his episode. It's an absolutely, if you want to understand how to not only start a business and succeed, but to start, succeed, sell, start, succeed, sell, start, succeed, maybe sell. I'm not going to float Sona on the stock market just yet, but Ollie's podcast is really one to listen to. Really, really insightful. www.thecaringview.co.uk. Freebie Friday this week. I'm sure we will push something out social media wise that you'll be able to utilize for your businesses. And yeah, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you over the next couple of weeks and at Health Plus Care Show on the 26th and 27th. Also, one last push before we forget. It is closed. The finalists, I believe, are being chosen. There is judging going on, but the 20th of April, it is Care Sector's Got Talent, and tickets are free. If you're interested in coming and you do want to come down and you want to bring the people you're supporting down, your team down, you want to have a sort of mood-lifting day, get in touch, and I'm sure we can sort you out some tickets to Care Sector's Got Talent, but you will also be able to watch us live from their streaming site as well. So, yes, get in touch if you have any questions around Care Sector's Got Talent. Until then, I am going to stop talking, so I've now got a dry mouth, and I'm going to bid you all a good night.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good night.
Welcome.